Good morning. Thanks for starting your week with me. I'm Savannah Sellers. Joe has the day off. We are going to begin with that breaking news out of the Middle East. Iran's supreme leader has declared 5 days of national mourning after Iran's president, Ibrahim Raisi, and its foreign minister were among those killed in a helicopter crash on Sunday. The incident occurred in the mountainous northwest region of the country. The chopper was among 3 others returning from a dam opening ceremony on the Azerbaijan border when it encountered heavy fog and crashed. Rescue efforts were initially hampered by poor weather and challenging terrain. This video, released later by Iranian state media, shows emergency crews carrying an unidentified body from the scene. The exact cause of the incident remains unclear. For now, Iran's first vice president has been appointed interim president with an election order to take place within 50 days. In a few moments, we will hear from the former NSC director for Syria and Lebanon, also the host of Oh My World on YouTube, our friend Hagar Shamali. But before that, let's get the latest from NBC News chief international correspondent Keir Simmons.
Well, governments across the Middle East, including here in the Gulf, are watching and worrying about events in Iran this morning with that news that President Raisi did die in that helicopter crash. An Iranian official describing it as a hard landing last night before the news of the fatalities emerged, and saying it was due to fog and bad weather. And certainly the images of the frantic hours-long rescue operation in Iran on the border with Azerbaijan do show thick fog and mountainous terrain. Now Iran is in mourning. The first vice president has taken over. He is almost as much a hardliner as President Raisi was. He went to Russia to do a deal over weapons back in October. President Raisi presided over a government that sent missiles towards Israel, an historic move just last month, over a government that crushed protests over women's rights after the death of a 22-year-old woman. So there will be many around the world who will not mourn him, many others, those sending their condolences, including President Putin of Russia and President Xi of China. Where this goes now in a region so marked by instability is a question many people in many capitals will be asking today.
Keir Simmons, thank you very much. Let's now bring in Hagar Shamali. Hagar, good morning. So, is there any reason to believe that this crash was anything more than an accident? Is that a conversation that's going on inside Iran?
No, to be honest with you, I really only see it on Twitter, and I don't believe any of the conspiracy theories about this. So I wouldn't even want to repeat them to propagate them. This was a clear indication of a very old helicopter. From what I saw, it was a 1979 American Bell helicopter that is extremely old, and Iran, given sanctions, can't get good parts to refurbish things like that or buy new ones. And obviously a case of bad weather. But what I would say is that it reflects when, at a time when you have the Iranian regime trying to show itself as this force and force to be reckoned with and show of strength given the instability in the region, it actually really only highlights how it is for them lives, how much they struggle, and obviously their incompetence. But no, I wouldn't put any stock into the conspiracy theories around this.
Thank you very much for clearing that up. Also, many had viewed Iran's president as a potential successor to the supreme leader. What kind of impact will his death have on Iran and the broader region? And also kind of explain that leadership structure to us in the country and what that means right now for the interim president.
Sure. Well, some people say that he was viewed as this potential successor to the Ayatollah Khamenei, as you mentioned, and that is a position that is not something that this position that is viewed as divine in the Shia Islamic religion, and it's not a position that is changed often. It's and so to have somebody hardline enough to meet those, not just hardline enough, but also to have the confidence of the Ayatollah says a lot. It says a lot about, and not in a good way, by the way, it says a lot about where Raisi stood on pushing an extreme Islamic law and honestly on oppressing his own people. I mean, this is an individual who's accused of, whom we know killed 5,000 prisoners in the 1980s, and really was a big proponent of human rights abuses against his citizens. And so now, when you have this vacuum, I don't expect the regime to collapse. I don't expect somebody who's not hardline to follow him. But that said, when you've got any situation where you have a regime that is so hated by its population, and you saw that, how many countries can you think of where you'd have so many people in the streets in a country where they can face such repression, doing fireworks and honking their horns and posting on social media how happy they were to see this man dead. And I think the only other country you'd see that is maybe in Syria. And so when you have a situation like that and the instability they're facing, ISIS threats, obviously the conflict in the region in general, then it's going to create this vacuum where you're going to have instability among the political elites and jockeying and maneuvering over that spot. And so that always makes things difficult and lends itself to possible problems for them in general.
All right. Hagar Shamali, as always, we appreciate your expertise here. Thanks for joining us. Well, back here in New York, former President Donald Trump's hush money trial is set to resume today with Michael Cohen returning to the stand for more cross-examination. The trial is now in its final days, with Judge Juan Merchan telling the prosecution and defense to prepare for closing arguments to begin as early as tomorrow, which means the case will soon be in the hands of the jury. We have NBC News correspondent Von Hilliard outside the courthouse with the latest. We also have NBC News legal analyst Angela Senadella here in studio for a closer look at the case. Good morning to both of you. Vaughn, I'll start with you downtown. So the prosecution wrapping up its case with Michael Cohen, expected to be their final witness. He is back on the stand today. This is the fourth day. What can we expect?
Yeah, hi, Savannah. Look, the cross-examination is going to continue of Michael Cohen, and this is rarely where Donald Trump's defense team is trying to strike some blood out of the testimony that he provided to the prosecution's questions. Of course, he was brought forward before this jury by the district attorney's office, and he testified to numerous phone conversations and meetings with Donald Trump during the 2015-2016 campaign, but also in 2018 when those reimbursement checks were written from Donald Trump to Michael Cohen. And so under cross-examination, we should expect over the course of this morning Michael Cohen to be further asked about the details of those meetings and phone calls and how he was able to recall the specifics of what happened 8-9 years ago. There was one particular phone call that Trump's team asked him about on the night of October 24th, just over 2 weeks before the 2016 election, in which he had testified that Donald Trump told him to pay Stormy Daniels $130,000, but then they matched up that time frame with some text messages that he had been sending, suggesting that he was on another frame track of mind there. And so this is really the moment for Donald Trump's defense team to call into question the prosecution's marquee witness.
Angela, let's bring you in here. So as Vaughn just very nicely laid out, we kind of had that general credibility issue that they sort of drilled down on. Then they really went to town on this one phone call versus text message and exactly what that meant. What else might we see from them? What's left for the cross-examination to try to focus on?
Well, look, I think the cross-examination is really just to continue hammering down on his credibility. And even though we just saw really one real inconsistency, and you might think that's not a huge deal in light of the extensive testimony, in jury instructions, the judge will tell the jury that if you think that witness was lying about any part of the testimony whatsoever, you can feel free to disregard the entire thing. So at that point, it's likely the cross will double down on this. But remember, we also possibly have a redirect, meaning the prosecution can back up there and try to rebuild Michael Cohen up and maybe talk about that phone call and see if there was another explanation and not just that he was totally lying on the stand, Savannah.
So let's talk about what could be next. So you mentioned redirect. Also, do we think the defense calls any witnesses? They have the opportunity to do so. Could they bring in some type of expert to button anything up? And of course, the big question is, would we see Mr. Trump himself take the stand?
Yes, of course. So they always could do any of those. The defense has all those options at their disposal. In terms of just numbers, though, the majority of cases tend to not even raise any defense at all. And that's because right now, the defense, all they have to do is just poke holes in the prosecution. They just have to ask questions to the jury. Did you really believe all of that? Was there any part of that you didn't? But if the defense does put up a defense, put witnesses up there, they have to also prove those witnesses' credibility. So we know it's possible they could bring in some sort of an election expert to show that even though records may have been falsified, perhaps it wasn't to interfere in the election in an illegal way, thus maybe a misdemeanor, but not, again, kicking it up to the felony there. Or, yeah, it's possible Donald Trump could take the stand. That would be heavily advised against, given the fact that in cross, they could bring bring up all of his past lies, the sexual assault from the E. Jean Carroll trial, also the civil fraud verdict, these massive questions of his own credibility, which I would argue would even rival Cohen's questions of credibility.
Obviously, so much to watch for here just in these next few days as this potentially comes to a close. We'll see what happens. Thank you both for walking us through that one. Before I let you guys go, Vaughn, I do want to switch gears with you really quickly. Former Trump associate Rudy Giuliani, he was served with a notice of his indictment in Arizona's 2020 election interference case on Friday night. Tell us, what charges is he facing?
Right, Savannah. It was almost 3 weeks ago that he was among 18 defendants named in an Arizona indictment by the Attorney General, and Rudy Giuliani had yet to be served his papers ahead of this Tuesday's arraignment hearing. And he even effectively taunted the Attorney General on Friday for being unable to find him. But on Friday night, following his 80th birthday party, I'm told, leaving his 80th birthday party, he was served those papers down in Palm Beach, Florida. So he is expected to appear for that arraignment hearing Tuesday. Of course, this spans from conspiracy and fraud charges, that he was a part of the alleged efforts to have a fake electors sent to Washington, D.C. to be counted by Mike Pence on January 6, 2021. Savannah.
All right, Vaughn Hilliard, Angela Senadella, thank you both very much. Well, on Sunday, President Biden delivered the commencement address at Morehouse College in Atlanta, his most direct engagement with college students since the start of the Israel-Hamas war. His speech at the historically black college comes as the Biden campaign is ramping up its outreach to black voters, especially in key battleground states. NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba joins us with more. Monica, good morning. So what were some of the big takeaway messages from the president's speech yesterday?
Well, we know that the president worked on this speech for a long time. It was crafted very carefully with senior aides, and he wanted to be sure to touch on some familiar themes like faith and democracy, which he did. But he also did address some of those concerns head on from faculty, from students, and he did talk about the war in Gaza and called for an immediate ceasefire. And that had been something that in the lead up to this speech, there had been some concern expressed. And ultimately, the faculty did decide to bestow him with an honorary degree. But there were several faculty members who voted against that, who abstained, and it wasn't clear what kind of protests he was going to face. In the end, there were some silent protests, some students turned their backs, but in the end, there wasn't anything that was considered completely disruptive to the ceremony. Savannah.
Yeah, and generally, Morehouse has not seen the protests quite of the size or intensity over the war in Gaza like at other schools, like what we've seen happen at Columbia or UCLA. But it did end up, at least coming up during yesterday's ceremony. I want to play a little bit of the valedictorian speech.
It is my stance as a Morehouse man, nay, as a human being, to call for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in the Gaza Strip.
Did the war overshadow at all any of the president's message? It sounds like you said nothing was too disruptive, but did any moments like this, or even what he had to sort of address himself, kind of become a big highlight here?
I think it was something everybody was watching heading into the weekend, and we know that the White House definitely had an awareness of that. So they sent down their director of public engagement, Steve Benjamin, to talk to students, to talk to faculty about some of their concerns. They took some of that feedback and they directly incorporated that into the president's speech. So it was clear that they wanted to be sure to reflect it. But in the end, it did end up being quite a moment. You see there on screen that there were signs of peaceful protests, but that has been something that the president has said is completely acceptable. The thing he doesn't want to see is anything that veers into the violent. And here's a little bit more on how that sort of was displayed during yesterday's events.
As you could see, there was quite the divide. You have alums that are standing up and cheering, and they were very happy because they understand the stake of the 2024 election in November. But then you also have students that juxtapose that, who believe in social issues. We are a large part of the Gen Z population. And so you saw students that didn't stand up, that didn't clap their hands.
And it was clear after the valedictorian spoke, what you played there a little bit ago, he got a complete standing ovation, and President Biden stood and shook his hand, and they had a moment as well. Savannah.
That sentiment, I think that what we just heard there echoes what many African Americans seem to be feeling about the upcoming election. What can you tell us about the president's upcoming schedule and what he is trying to do generally to win back those voters?
Yeah, I mean, in 2020, Black voters were so critical, not just to his success in the primary, but in the general as well. And we have really seen an erosion of Black support throughout his first term, despite record Black unemployment at a low point, despite some of the gains that this administration likes to talk about when it comes to improving the lives of African Americans. But at the same time, you really just are seeing many express their issues with the economy, saying that there are just things that don't resonate with them in terms of at the grocery store or at gas tanks. And then also there are things that this president has promised that he hasn't been able to deliver, like sweeping voting rights legislation. So when you talk to the White House, they really have been trying in the last week or so to have a ton of outreach to this community, and they want to continue that. And they know that if they want to be successful in some of these really key states in November, that outreach is going to have to continue, but they're really going to have to move the needle and have that translate into some actual energy and movement there. Savannah.
All right, Monica Alba, thank you so much. Well, President Biden's reception at Morehouse College reflects part of the growing criticism among students over his response to the war in Gaza. But that's just one problem he's facing with younger voters and just getting them to show up to the polls in November. NBC's Bree Jackson spoke with students from 3 different campuses about their frustrations with the administration.
From clashes on college campuses to students walking out on commencement speakers, we've seen young people voice their frustrations nationwide. Less than a mile from the White House, George Washington University became a focal point for those speaking out against the war in Gaza.
I don't believe I'm interested in being complicit in genocide anymore.
Others say protest, even peaceful ones, are not the solution.
I don't believe that's a productive activity, in my opinion. I think there are better ways to go about change.
Across the country, college-age voters are demanding change. Much of the focus is on foreign policy and their displeasure with President Biden's support for Israel. That's a sentiment we also heard at Morgan State University, a historically Black college in Baltimore, Maryland.
You're actively funding something that's taking away people's lives, so me personally, I just can't get behind it.
Safety is also top of mind, ranging from fears about gun violence.
I've been doing school shooter drills since the 2nd grade.
To political threats.
I don't think Trump is safe for democracy.
Election interest typically lags among younger voters. A recent NBC News poll found that this year, interest has plummeted to a historically low level, with just 36% of people 18 to 34 rating themselves as highly interested in the presidential election. That's down from 56% in 2020. Students at George Mason University in Virginia have mixed feelings about voter enthusiasm.
If things are the way they are currently, with the current administration, I wouldn't be shocked if a lot of students just don't care or don't vote.
I think as the election gets closer, students will be more engaged to get their voices heard.
Younger people believe they have the collective power to make a difference in the November election.
At the end of the day, we just need to understand who we're putting in office and what policies we're voting into.
Young voters are what we need right now to see the change in the country that we want.
Many eager to turn conversations and protest about policy into action. In Washington, Bree Jackson, NBC News.
All right, thanks to Bree for that report. Well, this morning, another round of severe weather could be in store for millions of Americans. We've got Michelle Grossman in studio to track it all for us. Hey, Michelle, good morning.
Hey there, Savannah. Great to see you. And yeah, we're looking at another week, a new week with severe weather, not only today, but Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So today we've been watching storms all night long in Oklahoma and Kansas. Still seeing some storms kind of moving off to the east, but these storms are going to stretch from the southern plains all the way to the Great Lakes today. Easy to see where that heavy rain is falling. That's where you're seeing those darker colors. Still seeing some lightning, hearing that thunder. That's going to reignite as we go through throughout the afternoon hours, evening hours, nighttime hours with that daytime heating, but still seeing some showers and heavy rain at this hour. Now, as we go throughout the rest of today, look at all this real estate, all these places that could see severe weather, especially where you see the orange, also the yellow. So places like North Platte, Colby, Norfolk, Omaha, Des Moines, even near Minneapolis could see some stronger storms. 17 million people at risk for strong storms, again, including really gusty winds that could cause power outages, bringing down trees, power lines, hail. A few tornadoes are possible and heavy, heavy downpours on Monday. Then as we get towards Tuesday, we're going to see more severe weather. So today, those showers within the northern plains, the Great Lakes, that severe weather, as I mentioned, ramps up later on today once again. And then by tomorrow, we're going to see that severe risk spanning from Oklahoma to southern Michigan. We're going to see a torrential rainfall. That's going to be a big story tomorrow with some flooding rains, increasing that risk for localized flooding. Again, seeing those dark colors showing up on our futurecast. Then by Wednesday, still some severe weather. Flooding is likely across the upper Midwest. Severe storms fire up along the frontal boundary to the south of that. And you can see that right along that line there, that blue line. That's a cold front where we're going to see those storms kind of firing up in portions of the lower Mississippi Valley into the southern plains once again. This is what it looks like on Tuesday. Now 43 million people at risk for a few tornadoes, damaging hail, also some damaging winds. And then Wednesday, 32 million at risk. So it's going to be another tough week where we need to be weather aware. We're going to look at severe weather from the southern plains to the Great Lakes once again on Wednesday. So notice it's a lot of the same areas getting hit hard over and over again from day to day. Locally, 5 inches of rain in a lot of spots, especially where you see those reds and oranges. And for the rest of today, another big story will be the warm weather, Savannah, from the southern plains or the southwest, really, all the way to the east. We're going to be into the mid-80s in New York City, but lots of states, 10 states, could break some records today.
I see 102 on that map.
Crazy.
Even. Wow. All right, Michelle, thank you so much.
Sure.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.